by the end of the freight elevator failure on the 14th floor. Diana Voss would understand that the man she had passed 63 times, without a second glance, had been holding her company's overnight supply chain together with nothing but attention and silence. But first, Marcus Webb had to finish logging 43 temperature readings before the 5 a.m. pharmaceutical handoff. He moved through the basement corridor of Voss BioLogix with a clipboard and a penlight, checking the seals on the refrigerated transport crates stacked against the far wall. Each crate got 30 seconds. He read the digital strip, noted the figure in his logbook in small, neat handwriting, and moved to the next. No rushing. No skipping. He had done this every night for 14 months without anyone from the day shift knowing his name. The building hummed around him. The penlight moved. The numbers were good. Marcus Webb was 41 years old and worked the night delivery and cold chain logistics shift at Voss BioLogix, a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company occupying 14 floors of a building in the city's eastern business district. His job title on the company roster was overnight receiving and temperature compliance technician. The day staff called the role the night runner when they thought about it at all. He had taken the position because the shift ran from 10 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. That window meant he could drop Lily at school by 8:15, sleep from 9 until 2:30, pick her up at 3, spend the afternoon and dinner with her, put her to bed at 8, and be at the loading dock by 9:45. Nobody at Voss BioLogix knew why he had chosen night work, and nobody had asked. His apartment was 12 minutes from the building by bus. It had 2 bedrooms. The smaller one had a glow-in-the-dark star map on the ceiling that his wife Renata had painted freehand the week before Lily was born. Lily was 7 now. Renata had been gone for 2 years and 4 months. A blood clot, fast and total, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had been at work when his sister called. He had driven home doing the math. If he could get Lily into a school day schedule, if he could find a job that left the afternoons open. If he could be there when she came through the door, then something would still be intact. Something would still be a home. He had taken the Voss BioLogix posting 3 weeks after the funeral. Every night at 11:15, after the first temperature round, he called Lily. She was asleep by then, and his sister Deb stayed over on work nights, but Lily had asked to hear his voice before the quiet got too long. So he recorded a short message on the phone, and Deb played it for her on the small speaker on the nightstand. He changed the message each night. Tuesday he had said, "The thermometers were all happy tonight. I checked. Sleep warm." On Wednesday, "I found a packing label from a city in Sweden. I'm keeping it for your collection." On Thursday, nothing particularly remarkable had happened, so he said, "Your star map is probably glowing right now. I can almost see it from here." He could not see it, but it helped him to say it. 14 floors above the basement loading dock, Diana Voss worked past midnight most Tuesdays preparing for Wednesday board calls. She was 48, the founding CEO. She understood refrigeration compliance, hospital procurement cycles, and the specific paranoia of pharmaceutical regulators better than most people in the industry. What she did not understand, what she had never needed to understand, was what happened in her own building after 9 p.m. Overnight operations were managed by Paul Reuter, operations director, 6 years with the company, expert at making his own competence visible. He sent Diana monthly compliance summaries with charts. The overnight technicians appeared as a line item, overnight staff, 3 FTE. Diana had no reason to look further. Reuter had hired Marcus 14 months ago and had since relied on something he could not explain and would not have admitted. Marcus's rounds were never wrong. In 14 months, the cold chain had not produced a single excursion report. Reuter had stopped asking why and started taking credit. What he did not like was that Marcus had begun logging observations beyond his job description, handwritten notes in a secondary compliance book in the dock office. Notes about a faulty valve seal on refrigeration unit 4. Notes about a carrier driver arriving with pre-signed temperature logs. Notes that, if anyone followed them upward, would become a record of things Reuter had been notified about and had not acted on. Reuter had decided Marcus needed to be easier to remove. There was a particular kind of knowledge Marcus carried, that had nothing to do with the Voss BioLogix job description and everything to do with who he had been before. For 9 years before Renata's death and before Lily needed him fully present, Marcus Webb had been a federal food and drug compliance investigator. He had worked pharmaceutical distribution violations, spoiled cold chains, falsified temperature logs, kickback arrangements between carriers and receiving managers. He knew every cut corner in the industry by the specific shape of its documentation gap. He could read a temperature log the way a doctor reads a film, not just the numbers, but what the numbers were not saying. He had left the federal position after Renata died. The work required travel and irregular hours, and there was no version of that life in which Lily had a parent reliably home. He had put his credentials in a folder in the closet and taken the night runner job at Voss BioLogix because it paid enough, fit the schedule. And he admitted to himself on the bus ride home some mornings, because he could see the problems clearly, and it was difficult for him to simply leave problems alone. He did not fix everything. He was not there to investigate, but he logged what he saw. The valve on Unit 4 he had flagged in October. By November, he had added a sketch of the compression pattern and a note that the unit was running 0.4 degrees warmer than its set point at peak load. In December, he had flagged it again and noted that the secondary seal was showing condensation that the primary log was not capturing. In January, without authorization, he had called the refrigeration service company's emergency line from his personal phone, described the fault, and asked them to send a technician. He told them he was the facility contact. He was not. The technician came, found the fault exactly as described, and replaced the valve assembly. Marcus put the service record in the compliance book and said nothing to anyone. The carrier problem was more complicated. A driver named Osai had been arriving twice a week with pre-signed temperature logs filled in before delivery, with round numbers that no actual reading ever produced. Marcus had begun counterlogging. His own temperature readings taken at the dock the moment each crate arrived, recorded in a separate column in his personal notebook. The gap between Osai's declared temperatures and Marcus's observed temperatures was consistent, small enough to pass a cursory review, and large enough to matter for a vaccine shipment. He had not reported it yet. He was building a record. He needed it to be undeniable before it went anywhere, because the person it would have to go to was Paul Reuter. And Marcus had understood from the first month that Reuter was not a person who received inconvenient information gracefully. Lily visited the building once. It was a Thursday in March, a teacher development day, and Marcus's sister Deb had a medical appointment she could not move. Marcus brought Lily in at 11 p.m. After clearing it with the dock security officer, a quiet man named Phil who had 2 grandchildren, and found the arrangement reasonable. Lily was 7 and took her surroundings seriously. She walked beside Marcus in the basement corridor with her stuffed rabbit, named Captain Ears, gray-brown and ear-worn from 4 years of custody, pressed against her chest. And she looked at everything with the focused attention of someone memorizing a route. "These boxes are cold," she said, standing beside a refrigerated crate bank. "They have medicine inside," Marcus told her. She thought about this. "Medicine needs to be cold so it stays medicine." "That's exactly right." She nodded as though confirming a calculation she had already performed and did not ask further questions. When they passed the secondary compliance book on the dock office shelf, she pointed to it. "Is that your writing book?" "One of them." She looked at the shelf for a moment. "You have the same handwriting as your grocery lists," she said, and went back to looking at the crates. Phil, watching from the door, said nothing. He had been watching Marcus work for 14 months. He understood, without needing it explained, that this was a man whose entire life was organized around not letting a 7-year-old come home to an empty apartment. 3 weeks after Lily's visit, Paul Reuter filed a performance note against Marcus with the HR coordinator. The note alleged that Marcus had been observed leaving his temperature rounds incomplete on 2 occasions in February. Reuter had included 2 dates. Marcus checked his logbook. Both dates showed complete, time-stamped entries. He told the HR coordinator this. She said she would look into it. She did not look into it. The freight elevator serving floors 12 through 14 failed on a Wednesday night in April at 11:48 p.m. The failure was mechanical. A cable tension sensor had been flagging intermittently for 3 weeks, and Marcus had noted it twice in the compliance book, once in February and once in early April. Flagging it as a pending maintenance item, Reuter had not acted on either note. The sensor finally tripped the elevator's emergency brake, locking the car between floors 13 and 14 with a payload of temperature-sensitive oncology reagents scheduled for transfer to St. Clements Hospital by 6 a.m. The reagents could not go by stairwell. The transit containers were sealed units requiring mechanical lift. The only alternative was the external freight platform on the building's north face, which required a key override from the dock office, a certified operator, and someone who knew the platform's manual load sequence from the physical operations manual rather than the digital system, because the digital system was locked out along with the elevator. Marcus knew the sequence. He had read the operations manual his first week on the job because he read things. He had the dock office key because he was the only overnight person whose duties required dock office access. He had the certified operator status because Voss BioLogix's insurance carrier had required all overnight staff to hold the external platform certification. And Marcus had taken the exam 18 months earlier when he was still in his first week, before anyone had explained to him that in practice nobody ever used the external platform. He ran the sequence in 16 minutes. The reagent containers reached the loading bay. He notified the 6 a.m. transport crew by text and updated the transfer log. Then he went back to his temperature rounds. What he had not known, because there was no reason he would have, was that Diana Voss was in the building that night. She had come in at 9 to prepare for a morning presentation to the hospital network procurement board. She had been working on 14 with the lights on when the elevator locked. She had walked to the stairwell, looked down 13 flights, decided against it, and called building security. Building security had connected her to the dock office line. Marcus had answered. He had told her in 6 sentences what the problem was, what the alternative was, and how long it would take. She had asked his name. He had told her. She had said she would wait. She came down in the stairwell to floor 12 when she heard the platform mechanism engage. She stood at the freight access window on 12 and watched him work in the floodlight below, moving the containers with a 2-wheel dolly, reading the manifest against the crate markings. Operating the platform lift with the careful deliberateness of someone who had done something like this before, though not this specifically. When the last container was secured, and he looked up to check the bay door status, he saw her at the window. He nodded once, the way a person nods when a task is finished. She stood there another moment before she turned and went back to the stairwell. She was on floor 14 for another 2 hours. She did not finish the presentation she had come in to write. The next morning she asked her assistant for the name of the overnight receiving technician. The assistant came back with, Marcus Webb, overnight receiving and temperature compliance technician, hired 14 months ago, reports to Paul Reuter. She asked for his personnel file. She asked for the operations manual section on external platform certification. She sat at her desk and read both. The personnel file told her almost nothing useful. It listed his previous employer as a federal agency, categorized under regulatory services with no further detail. His application had listed 9 years of compliance and logistics experience. His references had not been followed up thoroughly. She could see from the file that Reuter's assistant had made 2 calls, reached voicemail both times, and marked the box complete. What caught her attention was the handwriting. The compliance log that Marcus submitted weekly was printed from the digital system. But the secondary compliance book, which she had not known existed until she asked Phil, the dock security officer, what he knew about the overnight technician, was handwritten. And Phil had brought it to her office that afternoon. She read it for 40 minutes. The entries were systematic in a way that was not consistent with the role's job description. They cross-referenced regulatory tolerance windows by manufacturer lot number. They used notation that she recognized from FDA excursion protocols. They included references to 21 CFR Part 211, the Federal Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Regulation, cited not by name, but by the specific subsections that governed cold chain documentation. That was not something a person learned on the job. That was something a person brought to the job. She searched his name in the federal contractor database. Marcus Elliott Webb, 9 years with the Office of Criminal Investigations, FDA, Senior Investigator. Specialized in pharmaceutical distribution fraud. Commendations, 2, voluntary separation 26 months ago. She sat with that for a long time. Then she read the entry about the valve on Unit 4. She pulled the service record that had been filed in January, the one she had not known existed, and read the technician's report. The fault description matched Marcus's logbook entry precisely, written 6 weeks before the service visit. She read the entries about the carrier driver, OSI, and the pre-signed temperature logs. She compared the dates against the official receiving records, and found the discrepancy column Marcus had built, patient and undramatic, in the back pages of the secondary book. She sat back in her chair and looked at the window. She called the hospital network's procurement director. She asked, as a hypothetical, what would happen to a distribution contract if a falsified cold chain log was discovered during a regulatory audit. The procurement director said it would void the contract and likely trigger a federal referral. Diana thanked her and ended the call. That same afternoon, Paul Reuter submitted a formal disciplinary notice against Marcus Webb. It alleged unauthorized use of the external freight platform without supervisory approval, a violation of the operations manual's chain of command requirement for off-schedule platform activations. It recommended a written warning and suspension of dock office access pending review. Reuter had not known Diana was in the building that night. He found out when Diana's assistant called to tell him his 4 p.m. had been moved to her office. She did not tell Reuter what she had found. In the meeting, she asked him to walk her through the overnight compliance structure. He did so fluently. She asked what he knew about the secondary compliance book. He said he was not aware of an unofficial log. She asked about the valve service record from January. He said he did not recall specifically but would look into it. She thanked him and said she would follow up. After he left, she sat at her desk for a long time in the quiet of the building. She called Phil at the dock. "The technician," she said. "Marcus. Does he know what he's doing?" Phil considered this carefully, the way a person does when they have been watching something for a long time and are finally being asked to say it plainly. "He knows more than anyone in this building understands," Phil said, "including, I think, what I'm looking at when I watch him." She thanked him and hung up. That night she went back to the office. Not to work, she walked the basement corridor at 11:30. Marcus was on his second round, penlight moving, clipboard in hand. He saw her and stopped. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't," he said. "It was part of the job. The platform certification wasn't part of your job description. I read the operations manual my first week." She stood there in the corridor and looked at him. He was not uncomfortable. He was patient in the way of people who have learned that most things resolve themselves if you wait long enough. "Who were you before?" she asked. He told her. Diana spent the next 4 days pulling records. She pulled the receiving logs for every OSI delivery in the past 8 months and laid Marcus's counterlog beside them. The temperature gaps told a clear story. She pulled the email chain between Reuter and the carrier company. She found in that chain a discount arrangement, a 3% reduction on contracted rates in exchange for what Reuter had described in writing as administrative flexibility on documentation review timelines. She had a lawyer on the phone within an hour. She also pulled the 2 performance notes Reuter had filed against Marcus. She pulled the HR coordinator's record and found the note that said the matter had been looked into. She called the HR coordinator and asked what looking into it had involved. The coordinator was quiet for a moment and then said it had involved speaking to Paul Reuter. Diana thanked her and ended the call. On the 5th day, Reuter was called into Diana's office at 8 a.m. His lawyer was already there. Diana's lawyer was also there. Diana sat at the head of the table. She placed the counterlog, the carrier email chain, and the falsified performance notes in front of Reuter in 3 separate stacks. She did not raise her voice. She did not use language that required clarification. She said what the documents showed in sequence, and then she was quiet. Reuter's lawyer spoke for 45 minutes. Reuter himself spoke twice, both times to describe himself as a person who had made errors in judgment under pressure. The second time he said it, something passed across his face, not shame exactly, but something adjacent. A brief recognition of the specific distance between who he had believed he was and who the documents showed him to be. Diana saw it and said nothing. He resigned that afternoon. The carrier contract was suspended. The OSI file went to the FDA's compliance division. Diana found Marcus in the doc office at 11 p.m., starting his first round. She told him what had been discovered and what had been done. He listened without expression. When she finished, he nodded. "The Unit 4 valve replacement," he said. "I called that in myself. The company should reimburse me for the service call." Diana looked at him for a moment. "How much was it?" $240. She wrote a note. He picked up his clipboard. "I'd like to offer you the operations director position," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "What are the hours?" "Standard 7 to 4. He did not answer immediately. He looked at the clipboard. She waited. "My daughter gets out of school at 3, he said. "I'd need to leave by 2:45. That can be arranged." He looked at her then directly, and she held his gaze without looking away. "I'd also need the mornings," he said. "I drop her at 8:15. I can be here by 8:45. "Also fine." He was quiet again. Not hesitating, computing. "I'll need a week to figure out what to do with my nights," he said. "She has a routine." "Take the week." He nodded. She turned to go. "Ms. Voss," he said. She stopped. "The carrier logs go back further than 8 months. Someone should look at the full 2 years. She turned back. He was already writing something in the secondary compliance book. "I'll have someone look," she said. "I can look," he said, not looking up. "I know what I'm looking for." 6 weeks later, Marcus Webb's name appeared on the Voss BioLogix organizational chart as Director of Distribution Compliance. His desk was on the 3rd floor, beside a window that looked east. He had a chair that adjusted properly, and a set of filing cabinets he had organized on his first day into a system that other people could not immediately read, but that he could navigate in under 30 seconds. He had told his sister Deb that she no longer needed to stay over on weeknights. He still drove Lily to school at 8:15. He was still at his desk by 8:45. He still left at 2:40 to be in the pickup line by 3. The thing about daytime, he discovered, was that it left the evenings intact in a way he had not fully anticipated. He and Lily ate dinner without him watching the clock. They did the reading homework without the background awareness of a shift beginning. On Thursdays, they watched nature documentaries. He fell asleep in his own apartment, in a room without fluorescent lights, in a bed he had not simply collapsed into after a commute. Captain Ears lived on the windowsill now. Lily had decided the rabbit needed to see outside during the day. Diana came to the dock office on a Tuesday in June, the old dock office, which Marcus no longer worked in, but had asked to keep unlocked so he could check the secondary compliance book's archiving progress. She found him there at 11 a.m., not at night, going through the carrier records from 2 years prior. She put a file on the desk beside him. It was the service record from Unit 4, now with a cover sheet. The $240 had been reimbursed, plus expenses, plus a formal letter of recognition for the unauthorized repair that had prevented a cold chain failure affecting a regional hospital's chemotherapy supply. He read the letter. He did not say anything for a moment. "Lily wants to know if she can visit the building again," he said. "She's been asking about the crates since March." Diana considered this. "On a weekend?" "Saturday morning. She'd like to take temperature readings herself. She's been practicing with the refrigerator at home." There was something in his voice, not pride exactly, but a recognition of something being exactly what it was supposed to be. "Saturday morning," Diana said. "Tell her to bring Captain Ears." On Saturday, Lily stood in the refrigerated corridor in her soft navy coat. Captain Ears tucked under one arm and pressed the temperature sensor against the side of the first crate, with the careful attention she brought to most things. She read the number and said it aloud, and Marcus wrote it in the logbook in the neat small handwriting that Lily had correctly identified as being the same as his grocery lists. Diana stood back and watched. Lily moved to the second crate. She pressed the sensor. She read the number. She looked up at Marcus. "This one is the same as the last one," she said. "Is that good?" "That's very good," he told her. She moved to the third crate, satisfied. When she had done 5 crates, she turned around and looked at Diana Voss, who was standing at the far end of the corridor in a gray coat and heels that were not appropriate footwear for a loading dock, and who had been watching with an expression that was quiet and specific in a way Lily found interesting. Lily considered her for a moment. "My dad checks these every night," she said. "He checked them when nobody was watching, too. If this story found you at the right moment, there are more fathers like Marcus whose stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe so you don't miss a single one.